Okay, now we would like to show the clip, Mistral, of the party last year. Who of you were in the party last year? Who remembers that? Gathered all together. We were, a lot of the Maricar survivors, we call them Maricar alumni, but fondly called Maricar survivors, gathered together. And the theme was the ratification of the 19th Amendment. The vote that women could finally get to vote after so many years in 1920. So we wanted to celebrate that. And what happened, we were all dressed in white, like we are dressed up today, all in white, and we marched around the pool. See, we were chanting, vote for women, past the 19th, vote for women, past the 19th, and fast forward now from 1920 to 2020, we have arrived, and it is now 100 years also for the prohibition, alcohol prohibition, and we had an event in April to celebrate the 100 years of alcohol prohibition. Then COVID arrived and changed our lives. And now we are looking forward to the election. We are looking forward to the election, and of course, the 100 years of the women's right to vote. That's what's bringing us together today, which is the summer party, and the theme again is the 100-year celebration of the 19th Amendment. Okay, and I hope that will begin our presentation. So here we have all our ladies. So with Mistral, with Mary, with Melanie, with Michelle, and with Emma. And the name of our presentation is Women's Suffrage, 100 Years, 1920 to 2020, Stepping Up and Speaking Out. So, and we would like to, I would like to begin this presentation by talking a little bit about the book that I heard Catherine, remember when you were in our party last year? I connected very much with the words by Gloria Steinem in her book, My Life on the Road. And remember, she was 81, looking back on her life on the road. And this is what she said. When people ask me why I still have hope and energy after all these years, I always say, because I travel. Taking to the road, by which I mean letting the road take you, changed who I thought I was. The road is messy in a way that real life is messy. It leaves us out of denial into reality, out of theory and into practice, out of caution and into action, out of statistics and into stories. In short, out of our heads and into our hearts. My purpose is to encourage you to spend some time on the road too. By that I mean traveling or living a few days where you are in an out on the road state of mind. Not seeking out the familiar, but to stay open to whatever comes along. It can begin the moment you leave the door, like a jazz musician improvising, or a surfer looking for a wave, or a bird riding a current of air. You'll be rewarded by moments when everything comes together. Each starts in a personal place, takes an unpredictable path that reaches a destination that is both surprising and inevitable, like the road itself. End quote. Today we begin our trip on the road to Seneca Falls, where it all began. And let's see who we meet along the way. And I pass on this declaration of sentiments to Ella Shirelli, who will continue the story. Ella?
There we go. Here I am, and I've got my declaration of sentiments. And I was so inspired by last year's pool party that I wanted to go. Where did the sentiments get established? Seneca Falls. So I took a road trip, and let me show you.
My map and my declaration of sentiments. My planning is underway for Women's Suffrage History Tour. Like Gloria Steinem, I'm gonna go on the road. So, we're gonna head out now, and our final destination today is Seneca Falls. Pulling out. Here we are pulling into Seneca Falls. Finally, we're here. We finally made it to Seneca Falls. 100 years later, here we are, Women's Rights National Historical Park.
Mariana Clintock over in nearby Waterloo, which is a national park for this property.
At the side of the visitor center, the entire Declaration of Sentiments is engraved. And look at all the names of the signers.
All of the names of the signers. There we see Frederick Douglass.
Fighting to be here, right where the women's suffrage movement began. Here's Mary standing in front of the water in the background. Seneca Falls, and the Women's Museum. Votes for women. This town is steeped in women's suffrage. And we're going to go next to the Elizabeth Cady Stanton House, and I'd like to read a letter here at this spot. The older we grow, the more keenly we feel the humiliation of disenfranchisement, and the more vividly we realize its disadvantages in every department of life, and most of all in the labor market. We little dreamed when we began this contest, optimistic with the hope and buoyancy of youth, that half a century later, we would be compelled to leave the finish of the battle to another generation of women. But our hearts are filled with joy to know that they enter upon this task equipped with college education, with business experience, and with a fully admitted right to speak in public. Ever lovingly yours, Susan B. Anthony. And after this letter was written, it would only be a few days later that Elizabeth Cady Stanton would pass away in 1902. Here we are, down the block, city of Auburn. Here's where we see the Harriet Tubman home where she lived as a free person. And in town, we see this beautiful statue. I'm so enamored of how she carried her gun.
Welcome to 27 North Main Street, Canandaigua, New York, Ontario County Courthouse. It's very important to the suffragist movement because it's where Susan B. Anthony was tried for voting in the 1872 presidential election in Rochester, New York. Because it was a federal crime, she was brought to what was acting as the federal court, Ontario County Courthouse, in 1873 for her trial. She was found guilty, was asked to pay $100 in fine. She refused to pay it in hopes she'd be thrown to jail and could take the case to the Supreme Court. They dismissed the case, however, so she was never able to take the case to the Supreme Court. But here we are on the site. Susan B. Anthony was tried for voting.
Now we're in Rochester, at Susan B. Anthony Park with Frederick Douglass, and her home where failure is impossible, Susan B. Anthony Women's Suffrage Museum. Here we are at the cemetery. I guess you would call it the end of the road. Here's Frederick Douglass and his wife. Here we are at Susan B. Anthony's final resting place. As a student at Vassar College, Inez Milholland challenged a rule that banned discussion of suffrage on campus by holding meetings in a cemetery. The beautiful Inez, born in Brooklyn in 1886, would be most famous for leading the parade down Washington, D.C., the 1913 Women's Suffrage Parade. After being on the road for women's suffrage, Inez would die November 25th, 1916, and these were the final words she spoke. The new Inez, Gloria Steinem. Born in 1934, Toledo, Ohio, her dad had their family on the road. She's an American feminist, journalist, social political activist. And I got to meet Gloria Steinem in 1981 with Bella Abzug. I hope that you've enjoyed our trip on the road.
Wonderful.
Good job, Ellen.
It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad and honored to bring it to you.
The Declaration of Sentiments has now been passed on.
Can you hear me, everybody? Because I'm here to tell you a story. It's a story of a woman with a vision, a suffragist reality tale titled The Woman for the V. That's V for votes. Her name was Wilhelmina Keke Lao Kalani Nui Weidman Dowsett. And her mother was a native Hawaiian. And her father was a German immigrant named Herman A. Weidman. She was married to Jack Dowsett, and that's the man you see in the photo. She was a woman with a vision, a kind of a princess of Hawaii, a kind of a princess in a paradise, a kind of a princess for the V, and that's V for votes. And now in 1889, Susan B. Anthony wrote the famous Hawaiian Appeal. And in this appeal, she called for the right to the women of Hawaii had the same right to vote as the men of Hawaii. That's rights to vote. But then something happened. Hawaii changed from becoming a kingdom to a territory of the US. A territory, a paradise, too difficult to lose. But then Wilhelmina had a vision. She envisioned that all women, Hawaiian, white, or Asian, shall have the right to vote. She was a woman with a vision, a kind of a princess of Hawaii, a kind of a princess with a paradise, a kind of a princess for the V, that's V for votes. In 1912, when New York City was having its big suffragist parade, Wilhelmina was organizing the suffragists in Hawaii. So chant with me, give me a W.
W.
Give me an E.
E.
Give me an S.
S.
Give me an A.
A.
Give me an H.
A.
What does it spell? WISA, the Women's Equality Suffrage Association. And so suffragists came from the mainland to speak in Hawaii. Then President Wilson gave the people of Hawaii in that territory the right to decide to vote for themselves. And that's when Wilhelmina came onto the floor of the Senate and she said her famous speech, that's the Senate of the Hawaii, the capital of Hawaii. And she said, "Sister Hawaiians, we are all together with our foreign sisters. We are working all together and we want the legislature to know this. And we must also remember our Oriental sisters who are not here today, but will unite with us for this great cause." In Hawaii, the bill for the vote passed in the Senate, but it stalled in the House. Dowsett organized 500 women of all nationalities and all ages to march and pour onto the floor of the Senate. And there they chanted votes for women with banners flying in the air. Forced to confront the demonstrators, the House held hearings the next day. 1 month passed, no decision. Wilhelmina sent the Prince of Hawaii, Prince Kukuo, over to the US Congress to lobby and lobby. And then the Princess Kala Kanui, she supported women's rights as well. And then in August of 1920, the sisters of Hawaii, with their mainland sisters, got the right to vote. They won that right to vote. That was the 19th Amendment. It was ratified and added to the US Constitution. Wilhelmina Kekelau Kalaninui Weidman Dowsett. She was a woman with a vision, a princess, a kind of a princess of Hawaii, a kind of a princess in a paradise, a princess for the V. That's V for votes. Thank you.
Yay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mel. Now please pass the declaration.
To
Mary.
Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Melanie. Thank you. Here I am with the Declaration of Sentiments. And Mistral's going to run a video about women willing to breach decorum to protest the false testimony of their president.
Alice Paul here, 1918, National Women's Party. We can't get President Wilson to listen to us or help us with the women's right to vote. Finally, we're now in front of the White House with our burning urn because of his lying speeches. We want the world to know. We quote the late Inez Milholland. Mr. President, how long do women have to wait for liberty? You have disenfranchised half the population. You're running around Europe trying to get the League of Nations going, talking up democracy. And you're saying in your speech, we shall fight for the things which we have always carried nearest our heart, for democracy, for the right of those who submit to authority to have a voice in their own government. Mr. Wilson, the women of this country have no voice in this government. Your words are empty. We will place them in the fire urn. Mr. Wilson, when will you help the women of America and become a full democracy? Hi all, Nancy Pelosi here. Here I am 100 years later, dressed in suffragist clothing. Here I am again at the State of the Union address, standing next to the stick of gum with the orange helium balloon talking in front of me. Whew. Oh my God, this is a speech. There's falsehoods on every page. How am I going to tell the American people? This guy is just talking falsehoods. This is not the State of the Union. This is his state of mind. And it has no connection to reality whatsoever. Oh my God, there they are, applauding him. Ugh. 100 years. Much remains the same, but much has changed. American women destroyed the false words of their male presidents. However, Alice Paul destroys those words and burns Wilson in effigy outside of the seat of power. Nancy Pelosi destroys false words in the seat of power as Speaker of the House of Representatives.
He shredded the truth.
So I shredded his speech. The Declaration of Sentiments to Michelle Obert Obama.
Thank you, Mary. So over the last 100 years, the role and rights of women have changed dramatically. And today we shine the spotlight on just a few women integral to the change we've seen. Some are feminists, politicians, activists, some controversial, and some may be unknown. There's no counting the sheer number of inspiring women that exist all over the world, but they've all contributed to and continue to change the world, all leaders in their own right. Now, there are many studies on what makes a good leader and what are qualities of fine leaders. And when I think of truly inspiring leaders, for me, there are a few key traits that always come to mind, whether leading a country, a company, or leading a tour. The first is optimism, or an ability to remain resilient and positive despite challenges that arise. Next, there's taking a world view. So there's an openness, there's a seeking to understand and incorporate diverse perspectives. Also, humility, or maintaining a balanced ego. We all have something to learn and continue to learn every day. But I think most notable to me is poise, and not just grace or elegance, but there's also a balance, an equilibrium or a centeredness, if you will, that allows us to move forward and to deal with challenges and stress in positive ways. And to me, Michelle Obama embodies all of these qualities. Now, of course, her resume is pretty impressive too. Graduate of Princeton and Harvard, lawyer, writer, mother, and former First Lady of the United States. But I think it's all of these traits that I described that really shine through and reflect the person she is and why she's become a role model for women, an advocate for so many, and an inspiration to young girls everywhere. And so as we forge ahead in this changed world and with a new generation of leaders, I think there's much we can take away from her example. And so inspired by Michelle Obama's poise, her centeredness, her calm, and also how literature and poetry were celebrated so widely during the Obama administration, I'd like to recite a poem today. And this poem was introduced to me by a colleague of mine. It's a poem by a woman named Judy Brown, who is also accomplished and inspiring herself. She's an educator, she's a speaker, she's a poet, and she's based in the Washington, D.C. metro area, where she teaches leadership for the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. I listened to her recite this poem on YouTube, and in her very own words, she wrote this poem about how you survive in very difficult times, how to remain poised, and as a reminder that not all of life is smooth, and to stay steady in difficult times. And so as we forge ahead in this changed world with a new generation of leaders, I hope we can keep this poem in mind. And it's my pleasure to share it with you today. This is Trough by Judy Brown. There is a trough in waves, a low spot, where horizon disappears and only sky and water are our company. And there we lose our way unless we rest, knowing the wave will bring us to its crest again. There we may drown if we let fear hold us in its grip and shake us side to side and leave us flailing, torn, disoriented. But if we rest there in the trough, in silence, being in the low part of the wave, keeping our energy and noticing the shape of things, the flow, then time alone will bring us to another place where we can see horizon, see land again, regain our sense of where we are and where we need to swim. And so if you need it, I hope this can be a reminder for us all as we continue to navigate these weighty and uncertain times together. And as we pass the torch to that next generation of leaders, may they be inspired as I have been by Michelle Obama. So I'd like to pass the torch to Mistral.
Thank you, Michelle. Mistral is coming soon. Hello, my name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Getting ready for a woman, it involves so many decisions. About how you're gonna present yourself to the world. We women work harder in this race because we are the women. I took office at age 29, and I'm proud to be the youngest woman ever to serve in the United States Congress. I'm from New York, representing District 14. I represent a new movement where working class women can be as powerful as a man. And you know what? It drives them crazy. It is time for ordinary people to do extraordinary things. So, if you are an architect, businesswoman, nurse, tour guide, or perhaps bartender like I was, change takes courage. It is possible. Now, raise your hand if you want to be a voice of change. You can use this platform too. And when you encounter men like Congress Yoho, stand up and speak out. No women should encounter that type of harassment, abuse, uttering nasty words. It should stop now. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. It's not gonna be a loss. We can do better. Now, it's on you. Thank you. Over to you, Mistral. Thank you, Alexandria. My name is Mistral Anampa. As we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, we realize our role is as important in 2020 as it was in 1920. Now, more than ever, we find ourselves still carrying the banner, the torch of social justice and change. I'm here to say stop. Stop the restricting medical, stop restricting relations, stop restricting education, stop the abuse, stop sexual harassment, stop thinking that women are not worth or capable like a man. Stop restricting life for the women. Because I was me too. Back in 1996, I was only 8 years old when I was sexually assaulted. My childhood was robbed from me. I asked many times why. God, my parents, my brothers and sisters made me fight for this life. I share my story in schools, with friends, and now with you. So you are not alone. You can provide hope. You can provide real help to people around of you. So we spread awareness. Let's fight for every individual whose heart is pumping and is still breathing on this earth. Love your friends, love your neighbors, treat them kindly, listen to them. Listen, I see wonderful women who are leaders around of me. I'm personally excited to see in this 2020 a woman running to be Vice President Kamala Harris. That is why drives me into the voting booth. It's also there I make my voice heard and elect leaders who fight for people and women's rights. It is time to step up and speak out so we all move forward. The torch, it's with you now. Thank you. Over to you, Ella.
Thank you so much, Ms. Strahl. And all of the tour guides and all of our friends today. The guides in particular, we have a very important role in our industry, and we'll come through this, and all of us will get back out on the streets and share these stories and the celebration of women's rights. I would like to close today with just a short snippet of a poem from Maya Angelou. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Thank you, everyone.
We would like to thank everyone who have participated in this event. Hashtag Right to Guide. The tourist guides are the champions of the industry. We will survive this pandemic. This is Mary Cardonato. Thank you and goodbye.